Good morning and welcome to another Managing Change Through Effective Communications. And we had somewhat of a literally whirlwind yesterday with a storm that seemed to come and go literally every 10 to 15 minutes. And it was interesting because we had braced for the worst, right? We had expected the worst. And yet, our experience was very different. And so today's program, talking about creating mutually successful outcomes, we're going to again use a very broad view, an eclectic view of how we can manage our life's changes. And I will punctuate this with a few specific examples, if you will. And we'll also discuss a particular situation that a number of us have endured. We may not have been completely aware of it, although the economy, our lifestyles, even our relationships have changed. They've been forged by some of these challenges. I'm going to just roll a little notice here because some people were asking. Let me see if I can find my banners. Here they are. So a number of people had sent in some emails or requests. What does this mean? Identifying intangible assets in producing tangible results. And the way that I explain this is, when you get up in the morning, and some of you know that I always talk about the night before, right? The night before you prepare for your day, the next day. Not just getting a good night's sleep, it is the mental preparation. And when you get up in the morning, you start to process what it is that you have to do to get where you're going, to address what you have on your agenda, and to sequence those things if you haven't already done that through some mechanical device. And then you go out on your day. And in some days, they're going to be incredibly mentally challenging, not just the physical. The physical we can typically address, we can deal with, we can handle. It is the mental challenge. It is the conversations that we're having with other people, with ourselves, in addressing the need or the challenge that's at hand, right? So by the end of the day, we are mentally exhausted. We are spent, if you will. And we come home, we come back to our abodes, our safe places, and I trust they are safe. And we're now questioning, how did we manage? How did we get through the day? And it's that self-talk, that private affair we have with ourselves that is questioning how we managed to get through that day. It is saying, yes, I know I have the credentials. Yes, I know I have the certifications. Yes, I know I have even the years of experience. And people have entrusted me with this project. People have entrusted me with this responsibility. People have given me latitude, authority, have given me the ability to show what I'm worth. And yet, the intangible is the faith we have in ourselves. The intangible is that self-efficacy that we used in a very tactile fashion to get through the day. Someone asked you a question, and perhaps you would typically go off at the handle, right? You'd fly off at the handle. This time you chose not to because of preparation, because of maybe a engagement, an association you're with, a group that you have learning from, how to address your challenges. Maybe you have a coach, maybe you have a mentor. Maybe you have a guardian who is helping you along. Maybe you have hope, spirituality. Perhaps it's that parent conversation you had 20, 30 years ago, or even a week ago. I remember having a conversation with a gentleman, and he said his great grandmother would take him aside and ask him, "What have you done today to help someone else?" It wasn't about helping him, it was about helping someone else. And he said that has positioned his approach to people in a very different light than most others, because most of us want to get something so that we can move forward with our lives, with our situation, address our challenges. And yet his approach was, how can I help this individual? How can I understand this individual so that I can help them? How do I communicate that I give a damn, that I care? And that change, that shift, allows him to be more relaxed. What's interesting and what I've noticed is it's not just all about gaining stuff, being perceived as having the upper hand. It's about having the pleasure and making the decision, having the right, if you will, giving yourself the right not to rush in. I don't have to react. That's an incredibly powerful, self-endearing capability. Another gentleman, actually it was a woman, who I met at Citibank going back some years, right? And she was giving a presentation, and this was a face-to-face, big auditorium, conference actually. And she said, we must think of ourselves as economic units and not consumers. Maybe I should have used that. Use this story, yesterday's conversation. Don't think as a consumer. Stop speaking to yourself as a consumer. And the way that she framed it was, a consumer has a certain identity. Consumer means and is identified with a type of person's actions. A person's actions, right? Listen to that. Whereas an economic unit is, what is that resource capable of doing? Right? What is the outcome that it can generate? What's the value of that? And when we talk about value, we talk about performance, we talk about even motivation, which that word kind of is, for me, is pushed to the side. I look at how I can bring some value to the table. And therefore, I have to understand the situation. Therefore, I have to understand the person I'm speaking with. Therefore, wait for it, I have to ask the right questions. Solution-focused brief therapy. It is not by happenstance that I've gone through life with my challenges. And at this point, I am discovering new opportunities. I am discovering, in retrospect, what I have learned and how I can use it going forward. It is not helter-skelter. It is not random. And as we know, and studies have shown, random is not random. It is that we need to understand its sequence. Managing change through effective communications. This stuff is wonderfully informative and eye-opening, and in many cases, mentally releasing of the pressures that we put on ourselves. You know the expression, when I was young, I thought I knew everything. As I got older, the burden was lifted. Creating mutually successful outcomes is doing so-called, and now I'm going to debunk this concept, heavy lifting up front. Because if you don't do that work, if you don't do the research, if you don't take the time to find out and ask informative questions, if you don't prepare yourself, if you don't learn how to ask effective questions, the heavy lifting will be eternally on the back end. And it probably will start anytime after you start the conversation because you're going in the wrong direction. You've gone off on a spur, and that spur could take you into, what was it? Yesterday's conversation, quicksand, conversations of quicksand. It is developing your awareness. It is looking at your other members in the conversation and seeking to endear them to you by letting them know you've done some homework on their behalf. I had a conversation the other day, young lady. Everyone was talking about all the incidences that had occurred, and I pulled back. I didn't want to go down that road. I had an urge to. I really did. I wanted to ask, why do you feel you have to respond in that fashion? What made you react, and how could you have done it differently? Instead, I said, what are your interests? What do you like to do when you have nothing to do? What do you gravitate to? What do you naturally gravitate to? And I asked it over and over and over and over and over again, where a couple of members in the meeting were like, hey, dude, we've asked that, done that, move on. I said, no, we haven't, because I have not heard a definitive response. I haven't heard at least 2, if not 3, of a similar response, a consistent response. Now I can go on to address those responses instead of let's move on. Mutually beneficial outcomes. I gain an understanding of the individual so that I can help them, I can serve them, and they gain the trust that I am sending out to them. They feel, okay, this guy is serious about helping me. This guy is earnest about helping me. I think I can let my guard down just a little beany, tweeny, little bit more. Itsy bitsy more. How we can use our past engagements to guide our future interactions. How we can use our past engagements to guide our future interactions. I shared with you some time ago about a gentleman, Heinz Kissinger. Some of you know him as Henry Kissinger. Born at a time of incredible tumult and challenges, and came to America after the Second World War. And he would say to his students at Harvard, because he taught at Harvard, every time they submitted a paper, he would say, please go back and reassess this point. He would take any abstract phrase, a point that they've made, a summary of an argument, and simply say to them, would you please go back and develop that? You would use abstract words, yet they were very poignant. Develop that. Review that. Would you go back and test, show a test for that? And what I learned from that perspective, when we talk about mutually successful outcomes, is that not only is the student or the person reviewing that material, that content, providing more information for whatever body, committee, association is going to use it, they are developing their own skill sets. And instead of saying, I need you to go and develop your skill sets, which can be demeaning at best, at the same time, that is what is required, certainly in an academic environment. That person goes away with, what am I missing? What resource is out there that I need to consider that supports my argument? That is a lifelong asset That is an asset that will benefit you throughout your life. I know it has me, because you see that life does, in some respects, repeat itself. There are behaviors of my own, and as everybody else, that repeats itself, and that there are observations that can be made with a sequence of communications that lead to an expected result, an expected outcome. And we can therefore change the ingredients and the order of how we engage with one another to craft a different outcome. And that's the fun part. That's the creativity part. That's the I can transform, I can be the agent of change. And we can have fun with that. We can play with it. We can laugh at ourselves. We can laugh at the situation. We can dumb down, de-escalate what would otherwise be a traumatic situation. Another story, if I may. Talking to a gentleman on LinkedIn, and he said, LinkedIn suggested we should connect. So my response was, and that's all he basically said, LinkedIn said we should connect, let's connect. I'm like, okay. I'm driving the same Honda. Bentley, thank you. I'm driving the same Honda, same color, same year, same type, right? Different types. Should we communicate with each other? Maybe, maybe not. If we were going to a Honda fest, maybe. But if I'm just driving down the road, absolutely not. And he was assuming that just because LinkedIn, through an artificial intelligent piece of software, decided to join these two entities, that was going to be the creation of a professional, personal engagement. And I responded, I said, why? And his response was, because LinkedIn said so. And I said, well, what do we have in common? Now I'm just pushing back, right? I'm just pushing back. What do we have in common? And his response was, I believe, not that he's looked at anything, not that he's researched anything, I believe we have some common, some areas of commonality, I think his phrase was. And I said, well, what are they? So I want him to do some homework. If we're going to engage, I want him to do some homework on me. I do for the people that I reach out to. I find a position paper, a white paper, an article that's been written. I look at their profile and I see an area of common interest. Are you a Toastmaster? Are you a project manager? Are you associated with either of those two organizations? Have you attended? Did you attend Proud Park College? Are any of your children attending Proud Park College? Because the school is 200 years old. It's now, I believe, in California and in Spain, if not Gibraltar. So there are opportunities that it very well might be, right? You might have a child that's now attending that school. What about your association with Society of Human Resource Management? What about just general interests? Right? What about companies that we may have worked at different times? It doesn't really matter. You could have worked at those companies. Nothing, absolutely nothing. So I just stopped communicating. And ironically, and interestingly enough, so did they. So I submit to you, what is your purpose? Is it always, well, it has to be easy? And if it's easy, then let's make it easy by identifying common areas. It is very interesting how communications and the need to build rapport, I say the sequencing, I'm going to come up with a phrase. The sequencing of engagement. There you go. 3 words. The sequencing of engagement. Like that dog down barking every now and then. The sequence of engagement on Harpo, I know that barks, will be our small water cannon. No, I'm not talking about the ones that the kids play with. That's too aggressive. That's an assault on a little dog. He's about 25, 30 pounds. And he's actually a pure breed sheepdog. So he's very intuitive, and he's got an attitude. He wants to see, there you go. Sequencing of engagement, right? That's what it's all about. How do we go about engaging with one another? And how do we make sure that it can be some fun, even when it's traumatic? Let's jump in and let's see what that means. So I think we covered the outreach on LinkedIn. God almighty. that one is so laborious. It really is. Because they set you up to win and people still lose. I have another banner here. I'm going to turn this one off. I'm actually playing with this stuff so I can learn how to do it myself. Let's see, what does this do? There you go. This one's an interesting conversation, and I'm off on a little bit of a tangent here, but that's okay. That's the beauty of podcasting. You frame out your theme, give it a title, give a little explanation, subtitle, which we did. How can we use our past engagements to guide our future interactions, right? And the title, of course, is Creating Mutually Beneficial Outcomes. And then I just went into a couple of conversations. I think in a lot of cases, our conversations are kind of stymied by the speaker believing, the presenter believing that they have to follow an exact sequence of an order, perhaps in a more formal setting. True that, right? True that. At the same time, when we're in discovery, when we're in brainstorming, when we are attempting, the word trying does not exist in our vocabulary. When we are attempting to engage with one another and find out where the interests lie of those that are participating, a certain amount of fluid engagement, interaction is beneficial. And this little phrase, every morning, ask yourself, what are your best expectations for this day? And then your mind literally begins to work on that. And that is why I submit to you, use this the night before, no matter what's going on. Last night I had a very early night. It was not a good day. In fact, it hasn't been a good day for a couple of days. At the same time, that's not going to detract. It's not going to send me off on a different trajectory, because I've been there before. I've experienced bad days before. I've had inconsistent situations that I have to address with. I've had tsunami challenges. And if we begin to remember those and then project forward how we got out of them, what was the ingredients, right? You know, I love using the analogy of food with this. What were the ingredients that we used to get out of our situation? And then what was the amount of those ingredients that we used, right? Did we blast our way through verbally? Did we use a little soft touch here, a little smooth cadence over there, right? Did we use a tonality that allowed us to endear the person to us? Did we use silence? Can we use silence? If you're uncomfortable with silence, are you learning to use it in the appropriate manner? The sequencing of engagement. I like that. I like it. So every morning, ask yourself, what are your best expectations for this day? You can even say for this morning, quite frankly. What are your greatest and best expectations for the event that you're going to, or the conversation you're gonna have? And learn to breathe. There you go. And of course, one of my favorite, which is really our slogan, managing change through effective communications. managing change through effective communications. It's all about using that broad and essential capability, communications. And that communications comes in many, many forms, right? It comes in many, many forms. I'm noticing my background has gone dark. I'm not sure why. Okay, well, I'm not going to be distracted. So use of emojis, those images, right? Oh, it came back. No, that's interesting. Light changed, and my lighting here has not changed. Let's see, what does this do? Ah, maybe a little bit. Use of emojis in communications. Well, they have to be appropriate. They have to be, the silent conversation is they have to be accepted by everybody, especially in a business setting, presentations, inter and intra communications. They have to be appropriate, right? I think they have to also be at the right time. Some venues I have attended online, they just seem to pop up and they're more of a distraction than an enhancement or benefit to the conversation. Sometimes, and we've seen this in very heated environments, the emoji is used to de-escalate our emotions, to bring us down, to calm us down, to anchor us to what is really important and not get lost, as they say, in the woods. How we arrive at our use of assumptions. This is kind of cool because in project management, there are assumptions that are put into how we address a project, how we go about using the tools to address the project. And I've learned in conversation, when someone says something, I say, where did that assumption come from? And it arrests their statement so that they circle back around and tell me where it came from. I need to know that. I need to know that so that I can be aware of it, sensitive to it, and include it in my response. You're having a conversation, someone says something, and you respond. Instead of trying to address what they've just said, you respond, where did the assumption for that idea, for that thought, for that perspective, for what you just said come from? It's very powerful. I was working with a utility company in Delaware, group of customer service reps. And even though the theme and the idea was how to help them improve their communications, how could they be more effective, what was really going on was that the customers who had been with the company for many, many years were doing a roundabout to managers and above supervisors. And then the supervisors and managers were giving them credit where the rank and file were not able to do that. And they weren't able to find out why that was happening. And one of the participants literally started breaking out crying. And I said, where is that behavior coming from? In front of everybody, because it was exposed. There was no other way, I'm sure there is, other way of addressing it. I'm not going to say, oh, let's go out to the hallway, you naughty students. You attendee, you're interrupting everybody else's, what is it, karma? And she said her mother did the same thing to her. Well, you know, everyone else in the room was like, oh no, we're going there, right? Because it obviously happened before, right? It obviously happened before. And I said, okay, can we address that at a later point? And she just said, no. She said, nobody seems to understand. And I said, okay, everyone, give us a couple of minutes. And they stayed, some went out. I said, we're going to take a bit of a break. Most of them stayed, which was interesting. Most of the attendees stayed. And I said, well, how did you associate how is it associated with what your mother did and what was happening in the office? And she said, my mother does the same thing as the manager. And when she said that, which I was again surprised, because I would have thought she'd have expressed that same thing at the job, 3 or 4 other people said, yeah, you're right. You're right. I have a brother. I have an aunt. It was amazing. I was like, whoa. It's like life's just going around in circles and we're just trying to pick out what's similar. Bottom line is, she realized that people use different strategies to get what they want. And she was now able to go back and deal, because the whole group was able to go back and deal with supervision by saying, listen, you're blindsiding us by giving customers favors that we can't, so we look like the bad guys. And then go back to the family and say, I'm just not listening to this. I'm just not going to accept the way you're engaging with me. You turn off the spigot. You turn off the spigot because you've built the confidence to. It's not that what has changed is your acceptance or rejection of the behavior. That's the difference, right? That's the difference. You have decided mentally, I don't have to physically build anything. I don't have to physically put anything in place, legal writ, right? I don't have to put anything legally in writing. I just say, I'm not going to put up with your behavior, period. You can carry on. We'll put you in the corner and you can have your tirades, right? I'm not going to put up with it. I will not be moved by that behavior. How we arrive at our use of assumptions. There are so many different situations that we arrive at these assumptions. Title power, position power, association power. When someone assumes something, where is that coming from? That's the question you're asking. Where is that assumption coming from? Where is that being created? Qualitative and quantitative risk measures. These are more specific, and there is a whole litany of tools and applications that certainly in project management we use. And then there are competencies within those that people literally specialize, whether it's on the accounting side, the HR side, QC side, in operations. There are a number of very specific tools based on the industry, based on the company, based on the size of the company, to use those tools, to be capable of using those tools. And in the conversation, you say, well, where does it come from for mutually beneficial outcomes? In the conversation, you're saying this is a tool that can help us evaluate, test, get closer to, minimize that risk, assess the risk, assess the benefit. Remember, there's positive and negative risk. Sequence of engagement. I think that's a better phrase, a nicer phrase. What else? So what are you doing today? What are you up to today? We've got someone in the chat here. Let's go over here. What am I up to today? Well, I have to actually go out on the road, and I will be in the office most of the morning. I am finishing up a second course, Managing Change for Success, the Human Side of Change. And it's going to take into consideration the 4 aspects of my newsletter: you, the individual, how we think, where does that come from, how is that created, how we look at ourselves. And it's really external influences that have created that perspective. It really is. Think about it: social, cultural, family, theology, our nationality, the time that we're born, right? The time that we're born into. Family, absolutely. The dynamics of family is much broader than most believe or are aware of. You can have family from fraternities and sororities. You can have families from associations that you endear yourself to and find that they're very beneficial. Of course, bloodline families. You can have extended families from foster members coming into your house, being brought into your house, right? You can have people that come over to study and stay for 1, 2, 3 years that impact the dynamics of family and therefore how you look at life. I know when I went to Pratt Park College, and most importantly, because of the students coming from all over the world, local kids were local kids. I saw those in London. I wasn't impressed with those, even if they did come from Leeds or Liverpool or Manchester or any other major city. That wasn't impressive to me. What was impressive was the Szule Musicanias, the Kajdas from Poland. Szule Musicania, I believe, was from Mozambique at the time. Chris Enyura from Nigeria. I believe his name was David or Mark Anderson from Singapore, right? Of course, we had our American, Joe Bradley. That was transformative. And ironically, because my parents had me come over to America at the time, a lot of the English guys said, "Oh, I'm American." I said, "Don't be so stupid." I said, "How can I be American just because I came over here once?" So ostracizing people, we always try to do that. Again, you build up that fortitude, you build up that focus of how you want to engage with one another. And having that experience was incredibly beneficial to me. Even today, I still reach out to people across the waters because I just find that community, the community that it creates, it's the community that it creates more enjoyable than only focusing on the microcosm of our existence, of our life, of our experience, of our exposure to one another, to people, to knowledge, to how to do things. That's really where it's all coming, what it comes down to. How many ways do you know how to do something? And in what sequence, to what intensity, to what results are you looking for? Instead of getting stuck in, I don't know how to do this, or I don't know how to do that, or this is not working, or this is impossible to do. When people around the world are doing things with far less resources than us, than other people, let's just say for other people, right? Because think of it as the whole world. When we continue to engage with one another, I just had another thought here. Successful outcomes. Who determines that? Is it determined up front, identifying what will be considered to be successful? Or are we going to say, or we're going to extrapolate forward and say, okay, it was a good experience. It was better than where we are. It's better than what we're experiencing, right? Is that the way we measure? Is that the way we assess that conversation? In a lot of cases, emotion comes into feeling resolved when you're speaking with someone. You get a sense of them, right? And that is an intangible. That is definitely an intangible. It can be quantified. It can be anecdotally qualified. Well, this is how I felt about them when we started, and this is now how I feel about them. That's an expression, experiential. Right? Through that experience, this is what I now can say about this person and what I believe they are like. And as I've said before, when we say friendship, we use that expression friendship, to me, it is a little specious because I haven't fully experienced every situation that I can with that individual based on our needs. And we can be friends for a period of time, although I'm guarded because of the way people behave in different situations at different times. And that's fine. Some people are comfortable with that, others are not. That is communications. That is effective communications. We know that there are some significant stories going around right now. Of course, one is the civil responsibilities of our civil servants, specifically police. And this is global, by the way. This is not just America. It seems still that what happens in America explodes into other countries because they're going through the same thing. And they find that we are kind of the litmus test for that, right? We're kind of the litmus test for that. It is interesting and very powerful to have multiple countries going through similar frustrations, similar lack of communication with leadership, with authority. And no one has said, well, wait a minute, let's stop buying into, because it's a capitalistic spending machine. No doubt, there's not much you can do about it right now. There are some changes, certainly with Bitcoin, a different currency. I believe it's called the basket. Brazil, China, Russia, and there are 2 other countries that make up this basket of currencies. They've been trading for about 20, 25 years, by the way. This is not new. The impact, the communication is there are other ways. There are better ways. So that is also creating opportunities for economies to grow. Singapore over the last 40 years, it's a long time, but it's 40 years. Ghana, right? As much as Venezuela is held captive through oil, there are economic opportunities there. So that is also looking at effective communications, where it can be mutually, outcomes can be mutually created by seeking out those opportunities elsewhere. You don't have to stay in your backyard, even if you are selling a common product or providing a common service. Looking at how we engage, we said how we can use our past engagements to guide our future interactions, right? How have you managed to do that? Can you do that? Have you recognized? Have you given yourself the time to reflect on how you've engaged in the past and how you'd have rather things, how you'd have rather how things came out? Does that make sense? How would you have wanted things to come out as opposed to how they did? And what can you do about it? Maybe not with that relationship, but with another relationship, perhaps with another relationship. How you can, and in some cases, as I've always said, you can't. You have to let that relationship, let that experience go. It is what it is. Fortunately, and as long as you're not buried, dead, and buried, you will have opportunities to engage with other people. You will have opportunities to use what you've learned, what you've recognized. Some of the books that I shared on my last podcast, they help us understand the environment that we're in and the influences that impact on how we engage with one another. Now it's up to us to decide whether we are going to go forward, whether we are going to take that new information. Are we courageous enough? Are we mature enough? Right? Are we mentally developed enough? Yeah, mentally developed enough. You may have all the credentials. Do you have that emotional intelligence? Do you have that leadership style that is beneficial to the challenge at hand? And we reflect on our past. Most importantly, solution-focused brief questions. We ask effective questions. How would people that we endear ourselves to, how would they know that we have improved? How would they know that we have their best interests at heart? How would I know that my last experience is better than my current? What says it? How does it feel? What are the sensors that go off when we know that the conversation is going downhill as opposed to elevating it? When was the last time we felt this way? How did that feel to you? What were the ingredients to that emotional high? You're constantly assessing, you're constantly pushing your thoughts to a place of resolve. In some cases, you're going to be quiet. Meditation, many forms. Maybe you'll go for that walk. Maybe you'll go for that mental walk in your mind because you can't physically go anywhere. Maybe you will have a cup of Malunga tea. Our engagements are our own. Our engagements are our own. And it's interesting when we slow down and take out all the noise that's around us. In some cases, all the hype is no longer needed. All the doubt is released. We let go. And we see that the situation is not as bad as first reported, first thought of. And most importantly, we can then begin to craft a new path, a new conversation that allows us to gain the engagement that we're looking for, the outcomes that we desire, and that intangible emotional satisfaction that says we're doing it the right way. There's always going to be some level of unpleasantness. And I think that's the discovery. That's the area where we create clarity and understanding. Understanding that nature is not smooth. Nature is not smooth. It is violent in many respects. That perspective alone needs to be questioned. Who says that nature was anything else? You know the expression, why is this happening to me? I didn't know that this was going to be so difficult. With the current pandemic, why is this taking so long? In many cases, we're asking the wrong questions because they will not be answered to our satisfaction. And if they are, what brought that about? What made it different? What is in your hands that you could manage that situation, that conversation? Got a little note here. Okay, we've got, not sure who this is. It's an absolute Z3R0_X. Now there's a firm engagement of a person there, right? They want to know, good morning, how are you? Thank you for checking in. Please ask a question, and we only ask that we keep it respectable and something of interest. Okay. What is also interesting about creating successful outcomes is that we can ask the person we're speaking to what they're looking for, right? Very much similar to negotiations, similar to when you're looking to create a contract, to create business. But typically, and this is the way I work, I learned this from a gentleman, Alan Weiss, find out about the pain pleasure of the company. And you can do that in the annual reports, the quarterly reports, and certainly in the public relations writing that the company presents. We can't do that with people, so we have to do a conversation. We have to have a conversation. Once you do find out, then you're going to bring a potential solution. That solution is an opportunity to have a conversation, a meaningful conversation. When we doubt that, that means we are required to do a little bit more homework. And I think a lot of us either don't want to do that or we don't see the benefit outcome. And so we lose the opportunity. Now, in reflection, can you ask yourself, what else did I do to gain a favorable outcome? And is that outcome sustainable? You see, it's not just about getting the outcome, is can you duplicate it? And if you can duplicate it, do you duplicate it with more or less effort? Can you duplicate it by having the person that receives the benefit, the value, pull you along as opposed to you continuing to push, reaching out? That's the true litmus test of whether your communications are effective. Case in point, I had a great opportunity to work with two companies. I believe one was out of India, the other one was out of Texas. And they were offering project management certification courses. And I do believe the first opportunity came about because they liked my profile, what I had written on LinkedIn. The fact that I had worked with 3 colleges and I was still working with 2 at the time. The second one, I think, endeared themselves to me because I had written an article with some of the project manager attendees and said, helping project managers to be project managers. So again, it's how we communicate, how we send out our information, creating mutually beneficial outcomes, crafting that message, that narrative, your script, working it and reworking it. As you evolve, it's a compendium of work that we create in life. And if we can go back and reflect and say, I like this, I like this, oh, I want a little bit of that. Yes, we can season it up with this. Again, I'm back to my food analogies. No, I'm not that big. I'm 270. I'm a little big, a little heavy. 270. Love food analogies. And we can then see how to go forward with how we engage with one another, how we engage in different situations, every different situations. The beautiful thing, and I know this is another plug for Toastmasters, the beautiful thing about Toastmasters is that it is repetitive. Oh my God, I don't want to do that again. Oh my God, you missed the point. You missed the point completely. You're to improve how you do it. You're to realize the nuances, the subtleties. What's your style? What's the style of the recipient of that information? See, that's the kernel. That's the gold. You become unconsciously competent. Unconsciously competent. It's not getting through it. It's understanding what you're doing, the ingredients, the intensity, the amount of the ingredients, getting the feedback from the people that you're delivering your service to, your talk to, your conversation, and then doing it again and again and again, and subtle nuances, right? If you're going to be around a group of people, then you owe it to yourself to learn how to be more efficient, how to be more eloquent, how to use different words to gain a better outcome of more favorable engagement. To endear them, help them improve. See, this is the first story I gave for today. The gentleman told me his grandmother taught him to ask the question, how are you helping other people today? Not how are you going to help yourself? Not what are you going to accomplish? How are you helping other people? That's a whole other, I'll use a musical term, sonnet to that. There's a whole other level of maturity to that. And then you sustain it, and it becomes unconsciously competency of a unconscious competency of yours. So when you're out with people and you're watching and you're observing, you're giving feedback and you're listening, you're taking in, all of a sudden people want to talk to you. People want to be part of what you're about. And that can happen. It does happen. Engaging with others, mutually engaging with others, helping others. Sequence of engagement. Don't just go out there and throw stuff out there. Don't just shout at people. You know, we have people in our federal government that love to shout. Use calming, use low key, use that introvert's asset. These are all tools that require your mental maturity and intellectual capability to learn, to rise up and use them at the appropriate time. you'll notice that there's an expression that many know: empty vessels make the most noise. And yet, again, I'm going to say the media, the way that the media drones information to us. The good news, like any good salesperson knows, is you take the card, you turn off the television, you turn off the telly, you take the card and walk away and discard the card, because that's not the person you want to be around. I think certainly over the last 4 or 5 years, we know that we don't need the noise to get things done, because perpetuating the ugly perpetuates ugly. Perpetuating the ugly perpetuates ugly. So generation after generation, it's hostile. What if we could elevate the conversation and say to the person that's totally opposite, where are you getting that assumption from? Where are you getting that assumption from? Are you interested in having a civil conversation and showing where we get our perspective so that we can move the conversation, we can better understand one another, we can better provide results and needs? Thank you. Absolute. I appreciate that. As I say, 63 going on 6. I have no idea where that came from, but I just have been using it for like 4 or 5 months. I'm 63 going on 6. It has been literally a lifelong journey. I remember back in school, there was a song, I can't remember the name of the song, but the phrase was, can you put your hand in your head? Oh no, oh no. Dreamer, nothing but a dreamer. Obviously, I cannot sing either, but that's cool. He told me by the time I'm 90, I'll be able to sing. I've only got another 30 years to do it or so. And I asked a kid, I said to him, an older student in the class, I said, what does that mean? Can you put your hand in your head? And he said to me, which was very cool, poignant. This is what I loved about the kids from the school. They were from all over the world, and it was just so incredibly rich in knowledge. Absolutely. Thank you. Wow. You know, it's really cool when you get these feedbacks. Thank you. Enjoy. Okay. Please share. I like this real-time conversation. I do. I'm YOU. Spelling not there you go. Oh, it went through twice. Oh, they corrected. It still went through twice. Oh, it was on different sites. Okay, cool. So right back to dreamer, nothing but a dreamer. Can you put your hands in your head? Oh no, oh no. I asked one of the students, can you do that? And he said, well, can you? And I said, I don't think so. And he says, oh, you don't think so? He said, well, what does that mean? I said, well, maybe it's not physically putting your hand in your head. Maybe it's a metaphor for something. This is the conversations we used to have when we were 8, 9, 10 years old, guys. I'm telling you, it's great. And share it with other people, though. You have to share it with other people to get their feedback, and therefore you have that exchange. It's not right or wrong. It's not 1 or 2. It's not up or down, A or B, right? It's not that. That's a perspective. This is a perspective. And we had this conversation about that. And I said, I don't know yet. I said, I don't know yet. Well, it's the same thing with the Apollo space flights, right? We orbited the Earth, then we went further out, and then we orbited the moon, then we landed on the moon. Now we've got a space station. Now we've got we had industrial flights. Now we've got commercial flights. Now we're going to Mars. That's the same thing. It's the conversation. You have to open up your mind. You have to open up the possibilities. We may not have the science now, but we will learn it. Someone from somewhere else will bring it to the table. If we keep limiting the intellectual capabilities of nationalities, of cultures, of people, we're doomed to become extinct. we are doomed to become extinct. Think about it. You stop women from coming into professions. You've missed a whole mindset of intellectual power. If you stop people from certain countries from being educated, you're losing the intellectual capabilities that can help our species. If we keep thinking black and white, it's not a culture, it's not a country. It is a specious term designed to limit your capability in thinking. Unbelievable. Frustration. We use these mantras as if they are etched in stone, lead plates placed over us. The assumptions are wrong because we've seen that people with such little resources create such incredible benefits. They bring these benefits to the marketplace. So I focus on the communication that is holding us back. Solution-focused brief therapy has been an incredible tool to generate the energy, the motion, the interest in engaging with one another. The challenge is most of our brains are not designed, they haven't been programmed to think eclectically. We're parochial. We've got not just horse blinders on, we have lead plates in front of them so we don't think or see too far into the future. Yet, our leading educational institutions demand that of its student body. We need to have everybody on board. We need to push everybody to find what they naturally gravitate to and then tsunami them with resources, tsunami them with support, tsunami them with brainstorming sessions. It should not be, wow, this is really cool. It should be, what's next? What's next? Because that's life. That's life. I'll do a show tomorrow about the wildlife in the back. I'm going to take a walk today, somehow, somewhere. I'm going to fit it in. I should go out really early because you see the fox and the turkeys, and we have some guinea fowl out there, and they're all trying to live. I don't think we try to live. I think we just try to survive, and it's pathetic. It is truly pathetic with the brain, the capacity of our brains to think in divergent paths simultaneously. Here's one, and I'm going to finish with this. I was brought up so-called Roman Catholic. I have a catechism. I was baptized. I've got 4 first names: Ronald, Matthew, Paul, Alan, and Bartholomew. I'm going to heaven. Ronald, Matthew, Paul, Alan, Bartholomew. Look them up in the Bible. I'm going to heaven. My parents made sure. Boom, this one's in. Jokes aside, I was taught Adam and Eve. I was introduced to that we were reptiles, come from the ocean. I was taught we are also from chimpanzees. So that's 4, right? Adam and Eve, reptiles, baboons. Oh, the Big Bang. Also learned about the Big Bang. Well, guess what? I believe they're all possible. They're all great, fascinating stories, wonderful stories. I throw in my own. Other, a construct that I have not thought about, a belief that I have not thought about. That's a conversation. That's a conversation. It's not about right or wrong. It's not about one is preferenced over another. It's about knowledge. It's about information. It's about resources. And how we apply those resources to our lives will determine the quality of our life. And instead of talking about pain, suffering, suicide, we say to that person, where did that assumption come from? When was the last time you felt good? What did it feel like? How can we duplicate it? How can we replicate it? That's what this managing life's changes through effective communications is all about. And I am out of here because I have to go and do some other business. And you have a day to enjoy. I believe it's supposed to be cold again, but as we said, it's been like 6 hours of this and 3 hours of that all day yesterday. It was crazy. And I got off the road because I was not going to get swooped up and end up in some tree, which the winds really weren't that strong enough to do. But the assumption. Sequence of engagement. Try it out. See what you think. Take care.